All right, so approval voting, and alternative voting methods in general, we're going to talk about just a couple of different kinds. My main goal in talking about this, and I've talked about this 3 or 4 different times and done these different mock elections, isn't to convince you that it's better. I think it is. And if you agree with me, great. But my point in doing this is to get you to understand it and realize that there are different ways to elect a winner in an election that are at least arguably better than the way we do it now with plurality voting. And having said that, I'll turn it over to Frank, and then we'll keep rolling right along.
Okay. For alternative voting methods, it's kind of difficult to read my writing. Okay, the 4 that we're going to be discussing today: plurality, which I'm going to briefly say only one. Vote for only one. Which is what we have. Which we have. Approval voting is vote for one or more. Score voting is like what I refer to as Olympic judging, awarding a score of 0 to 10. The 4th method that we're not going to get into is called instant runoff voting, in which you rank them first, second, third, fourth choices, and until you have a majority for your candidate, your choices get eliminated and your vote gets shifted to those that are still in the running. I hope that everyone has a ballot.
If not, raise your hand and I'll pass them out. One per person, please.
Agreed. This, yes. So on one side, it's vote for one and only one, and this is the Republican primary race. And at the bottom of the page, you see that Bob Beaupre won the primary with 30%, and Republicans were told to be happy with that.
This is obvious, but when you so Beaupre won with 30%, which means almost 70% of the people did not vote for him. So a way to get around that is what alternative voting does.
Now, coming back to our ballots, everyone has a ballot. On one side, it says vote for one and only one, and on that side, please follow the instructions. On the other side, vote for one or more. I assume you'll vote for the one that you voted for on the other side, plus more. What does happen here, the nuance, is what is your threshold of approval and what's your motivation? Your threshold of approval might be, I'm only in love with one of these candidates and he's the only one that's going to get my vote. No harm done. Conversely, you might say, I hate this person so much that I want to vote for everyone else. And you might cast 3 votes, or you might cast 2. So that's approval voting, which is, once again, approval voting one or more. Vote for one or more.
This helped me conceptualize that with the 4 people on the ballot in this particular case. You look at each one of them individually without comparing them to the other ones. So you look at Bob Beaupre and you ask yourself, do I approve of Bob Beaupre as being the nominee? And you say yes or no. And if you say yes, you vote for him. You could even do this way. You can have a yes and a no box, which might make it easier to comprehend for some. It helps me out. So Bob Beaupre, yes or no, do I approve of him? Tom Tancredo, yes or no, do I approve of him? Scott Gessler, yes or no? And Mike Kopp, yes or no. So like Frank was saying, you could vote yes on all 4 of them. Now mathematically that would have the same effect of not voting at all, but you could do that if you approve of all of them. 1, 2, or 3, or 4. Then what you do is you add up all of the approval votes, all of the yeses. Whoever gets the closest to 100% approval wins. Nobody's going to get 100, but whoever gets the most approval votes wins. So that way you've got almost always somebody who's going to get more than 50% of approval votes. You're not going to have a situation like you did in this race, actual race, where the winner gets 30%. All right? It's a better way to express the will of the electorate. And that's what the point is of an election. And we're not a democracy. People in this room know that. We're a constitutional republic. But when we elect people for office, this is democracy. This is where democracy comes into play. And if the point is to nominate the person or to elect the person with the most approval, or that would please the most people voting, approval voting is one way to do that. I submit it's a superior way to do it than plurality voting, where you just vote for one. And there's lots of examples of this. Aurora had their mayor's election, I don't know how long ago, it was 8 years ago. They had 6 people running, and the winner had less than 30%. They didn't even have a runoff. like here, there was no runoff here. Winner gets 30%, they win. Hogan, what's his first name? Anybody know Aurora's mayor? He's still the mayor. I'm not sure. Mike Hogan. He may be a wonderful guy, but he won with less than 30% of the vote. I think that should at least perk up our ears a little bit and go, we have a winner who got 70% of the people that didn't vote for them. This solves that problem, as does some of the other ones. So that's how I conceptualize this. Do I approve? Yes or no? But let's do this for approval voting. Who likes Chinese food? All right, 1, 2, 4, 5. All right, just about everybody. All right, who likes Italian food? All right, anybody? Maybe have that's even more. All right, who likes Korean food? Not quite as many. All right. Who likes barbecue? All right. You guys realize most of you voted more than once? All right, and you should have. That's what I asked you to do. And we could have counted up the number for Italian food, Chinese food, a steakhouse, barbecue, whatever it was. And whichever of those choices got the highest approval rating wins. That's what we all go do if we're having a party or planning catering or whatever it is. We do that every day in our lives. It's some form of that. So it's not a concept that should be that foreign to you, but it is. Like me, when I heard about it, I just assumed it was some crazy statist progressive idea, and it's not really. When I first heard of any type of alternative voting method, Bill Clinton was president. I think it was his first term. And he had nominated, you guys remember this name, Lenora Fulani? She was some crazy statist leftist person. I don't even remember what he nominated her for, but he nominated her for something. And one of the things she was talking about was some alternative voting methods. And since it was Bill Clinton and Lenora Fulani, my first thought was, oh, this has got to be some crazy leftist crap. And that was it. And I put it out of my head until I met Frank. And Frank gave me a copy of a book. It's called Gaming the Vote: Why Elections Aren't Fair and What We Can Do About It. Something like that, right? Yes. Yeah. By William Poundstone. He's got a great history of different ways of selecting winners. The Heisman Trophy, we're all familiar with that. They don't use approval voting. What are there, thousands of football players? The people that select that don't just vote for one. There's a process. They Academy Awards, hundreds of movies every year, whatever the number is. The voters don't just vote for one and get a winner. Golden Globes the other night, same type of situation. Steve Bosley, some of you might know, is the CU regent. He's talked about how when they were looking for a new CU president, the regents got together and they had, got, I'm sure, thousands of resumes from people that were interested in it. Somebody narrowed them down, but then they had, I don't know however many it was, let's say 6 left that were given to the board. And they were going to decide who they were going to interview out of those 6. Well, the CU Board of Regents said, all right, who wants to interview person 1? And they said yes or no. Who wants to vote for person 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? They got a yes or no on all of them. They ended up interviewing, I think, 3. Guess what they just did? That was approval voting to get the 3 they wanted to interview. I think they used to select the Pope with approval voting.
Yes. Electing the General Secretary of the United Nations is done with approval voting.
There are several municipalities or local places that will have at-large elections. And let's say it could be any number of seats open at an at-large election. So you might have 20 people running for 10 seats for a 10-seat city council, say, or let's say 5. Let's say 5 general seats, at-large seats, and 12 people are running for those 5 at-large seats, you can vote for up to 5 of those 12. We do that all the time. That happens throughout the country. So it's the same idea. And so people can vote for 5 out of 12 because there's 5 open seats and there's 12 people running. The people with the 5 highest vote totals win. So that's approval voting, but you can only vote for 5 instead of voting for more than that. You're still going to have the same result. The top 5 votes win. So we do have that now, which is just a step away.
In City of Littleton, our city council consists of 4 district winners and 3 at-large districts that are elected 2 at a time. The top vote getter gets a 4-year seat, the second vote getter gets a 2-year seat, and then everyone else loses. So already in Littleton, we're familiar with voting for more than one candidate. And I'm trying to get it implemented for the district elections that you'd be able to vote for more than one. When Centennial voted a charter commission in, they voted for 21 candidates out of 35. Arapahoe County Clerks and Clerk Election Office is able to handle 21 winners out of 35. It isn't beyond the system. The system isn't going to be overwhelmed by how do we keep them straight. Arapahoe County can do it, and I trust other counties can do it.
With the instant runoff voting, one thing that really struck me on this, and this is all I think we're probably going to talk about it, is because in Denver, they do have runoffs for city elections. And in my race right now, there's 6 people. There's still time to get into it. But there are 6 people vying for the same seat I'm vying for. None of us is going to get 50%. I mean, it's highly unlikely. Top 2 will have a runoff election, which is about a month later. The first election will have, I think we're going to have a low turnout, but we're going to have some turnout. Get the top 2. The turnout for the runoff election, which will get the winner, will be substantially less, just historically speaking. Those races are always substantially less voter turnout. Well, and it costs money. You got to reprint ballots or print ballots again. You got to have people count the ballots again, do everything again. You're having a second election. Well, the instant runoff voting, what that does is you say, here's my first choice, here's my second choice, third, fourth, fifth. Count them all up, all the first place votes. Nobody's going to get 50%. If they do, it's over. You got a winner. If you don't, let's say my first choice came in last. So they cross that guy off the list. They cross my first place vote off the list. So then they look at my ballot and go, who was my second choice? And then they add that up to whoever that person is, which is exactly what they would have done if we had another election a month later. I go back, and now I have to vote for my second choice. Am I making any sense with that at all? Yes, sir.
That's also called ranked choice voting, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Same idea. So it enables you to have the runoff without having a second election because you've already expressed who your second choice is. Now, if you go back for the runoff, if one of your first choices is in the runoff, you're just going to do the same thing again. But there's a cost to having to go back and do the same thing again, whereas with the ranked choice or instant runoff voting, you don't have to do that. So that's just one method that we're not going to actually do tonight, but it's out there, and people are using that in some places.
There is no additional cost when using approval voting. No additional cost. The reason I'm an advocate for approval voting is that there's no additional cost. It's simple, and the ballots stay the same except for the instruction, one or more. There's 2 water districts that are nominally approval voting. Bo Schaefer's water district, left-hand water district, and Ken Carl that Mike Spalding are on are using approval voting.
How did they get to
because as a special district, they are allowed to make their own rules, and they quietly got away with it, I assume. Plus, they're friends of mine. Which may be a liability, But okay, so this happens at each state level. Here in Colorado, each state decides its voting method.
How do we vote on it?
And it's statutory in the either constitution or laws of the state.
Okay.
So
just real quick to clarify, that the legislature can change it.
yes,
Or we can do it via a popular election on the ballot.
yes.
Popular measure on the ballot.
Okay, so it can be either an initiative with $250,000 and collecting 80,000 signatures with an initiative, or because we have home rule cities in Colorado, home rule cities individually can implement approval voting. Approval voting can be implemented in home rule cities. The bill that we were pushing was enabling legislation for statutory municipalities and special districts to use approval voting. But with both of the houses being Democrat, Secretary of State testified on our behalf, office testified on our behalf with the bill, but it didn't help there.
And one thing I've noticed with clerks of court, they don't like to do anything that's different. Frank has done an incredible job down at the Capitol getting a bill in the past 2 or 3 years, past 2 years, that wouldn't have required anybody to do any of these things. But it would have allowed municipalities and special districts to do it if they wished. So nobody would be forced to do a thing. And Frank has had bipartisan sponsors on it. And the first year when I was helping you on it, it started in the Senate. Was it Balmer? Balmer? Republican from Centennial sponsored it. Democrats controlled the Senate 2 years ago. Yes. All right? And so it went to a democratically controlled committee. And at that time, it was before the recalls, and Morse was the Senate president. He basically was killing all Republican bills. And so we got into this committee, 5 people on the committee, again, just allowing municipalities to do it if they wished. And the 2 Republicans on the committee voted for it. The 3 Democrats killed it. And again, a similar thing happened last year, right, although Morse was no longer involved.
Representative Singer.
From up here, Boulder. Yep.
Sponsoring. Representative Singer was the sponsoring legislator. I thought, seeing as he was part of the majority party, that I wouldn't go through the same stomping I went through the first time. And then I realized, no, I'm not being stomped by Republicans or Democrats. I'm being stomped by incumbents who have won at this and are concerned about changing their rules and might jeopardize their position. So I've been very grateful. I've been very grateful for my sponsors, but it's a brick wall of running into incumbency. My pitch is that for major factions, fewer spoilers and less sabotage. For the minor factions, it will be viability and visibility. I wish I could promise libertarians that changing the voting method would elect libertarians. No, I'm into lying, but not that much. When I'm pitching alternative voting to Republicans, I confess that when I first heard the concept, I thought it was sacrilegious that you could vote for more than one candidate. The more I've looked into it, I realize the important thing is still ballot custody. Make sure that it's only one ballot per voter. but that on that ballot you can be more expressive and vote for more than just one candidate as the current system has it. Currently, the plurality system we have, you provide the minimum information on your ballot. Anyone deny that? When it says vote for one and only one, that's the minimum amount of information. With regards to approval voting, to paraphrase Dave's comment about with each of them, in a sense, you're able to say yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. Really, it's yes or leave it blank, yes or leave it blank, yes or leave it blank. And so you have the liberty to be more expressive and to voice an opinion on each of the candidates. So I think fundamentally it's taking you towards more choice and more liberty and a prerogative for each of the candidates rather than just expressing one.
The other thing that happens with plurality voting, which is what we have now, where the winner can have 30%. Right? Yeah, absolutely. You've got some strategery that comes into play that can't happen with approval voting or with core voting. Does anybody here remember John Dindal? He was a Republican, a good guy, and I guess he passed away about a year ago. He was and he's actually mentioned in this book, which I read before I met him, because he was the Arizona chairman of the Arizona Republican Party before he moved to Colorado. They had a governor's race.
Approval voting came about in different forms in Arizona.
All right. Yep. But what I was going to talk about with him in this case was the Greens have an active party in Arizona, and there was a governor's race, and John Dindal, he wasn't hiding this. He wanted the Republican Party to donate money to the Green because the theory is
sabotage work.
Right. He wanted to give money to the Green because he wanted to help suck votes away from the Democrat. At least that was the strategy. All right. In an approval voting situation, that's what can happen. And so as talked about in this book, Gaming the Vote, the Green, apparently they sat on it for a while and they were like tormented. Well, should we take money from the Republican Party or not? I think they eventually did not, but you can still see how an individual Republican or somebody supporting a more conservative candidate could just send money to the Green or vice versa. And people always blame the Libertarians for these, or Ross Perot, for Clinton being elected twice. Clinton had 2 victories with less than 50% of the popular vote. Now, I know it's electoral college, it doesn't matter, but the principle is the same. Yeah, exactly, Ross Perot. So you can see how if people wanted to vote for Ross Perot and was it Dole in the first Bush, they could have done that. In approval voting, they could have voted for both of them. So there's no stealing of votes. That's another concept I can talk about another time because you all own your votes. Nobody can steal them from you. You can't steal what you own. But that's kind of the language you hear. So if all the people that voted for Perot also voted for either the first Bush or Dole, then those guys would have won, or even a large percentage of them. But it's not always as a conservative. If it was not for Ralph Nader in Florida, Al Gore would have been the president instead of W. It was a very close race in Florida, if y'all remember, with all the hanging chads and everything else, but forget about that. Whatever the number was of votes that Ralph Nader got, if 60% of Ralph Nader's votes had gone to Gore instead, Gore won Florida. Gore got those electoral college votes. Gore would have been the president. So it's not just a libertarian ruining things for the Republicans. It can work for the Greens as well. The Greens can also do it to the Democrats. So when you've got something, if you look at it on the traditional left-right scale, in Florida, over 50% of the people wanted somebody to the left because whatever it was, 48% voted for Gore and 2.5% voted for Nader, whatever it was. It was something, it was more than 50%. And yet, the guy on the other side who got less than half is the winner. So again, that may work out in a given situation like that. It may not work out with the pro situation. The point is, you don't have that problem with alternative voting methods. And it's rare. It doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, I think it matters.
Let me see. Do we have questions? Are we making sense? Yes.